I
Both.
started out as a classroom teacher, and my first couple of jobs were teaching at little K through 12 schools out in rural areas where I was the science department. And I had a master's in biology at that time, but some of the other sciences I had a very little background in. So I had to learn as I went. And geology and earth science is one of the things I picked up in teaching eighth grade earth science. And I went back to school and worked more on it. And then I got teaching at the college level, and the classes that I was asked to teach were the ones nobody else wanted to teach, which were the introductory courses in biology and earth science. And having taught kids starting in sixth grade science on up, I enjoyed that. There's a way to do it where you're teaching the concepts and there's a structure to the knowledge. And if you do it right, it's a very efficient way of teaching, and kids like it too. So that's how I spent most of my career. And when it came time to write Lost Worlds, much of what I learned in classroom teaching and how you go from these simple ideas to more complex ones as you go along, that's what I used in the book. And trying to put it into the easiest form to understand that you could do and still have the big picture of what's going on with the state.
As they say in politics, you have gotten the grass down to where the goats can eat it, and that's a talent. Uh, so Alabama really is spectacular in terms of its geology.
It's a very interesting state to study for geology because of the geological diversity that the state has. And the diversity, a lot of it is tied to where we are on the continent. We're right at the edge. So we've got a record of all these different rock layers that have been deposited right off the edge of North America through at least a half a billion years. But then we have events that have happened to Alabama through time, such as this collision with Africa back in the late Paleozoic that caused the Appalachian Mountains to be here, that have brought rocks up that would be buried 4 and 5 miles beneath the surface. And because of this folding of the earth that happened here, those rocks have been brought up, and erosion have moved the tops of the mountains, and we can go right over here to Weiss Dam and see 500 million year old rocks in the bed of the river turned up 90 degrees from normal.
Which makes Alabama really unusual because when you look at other states, there's one layer at a time, right?
Right. You can go over into Georgia and it's very bland past a point. Then this little northwest corner is nice because it's not too different from Alabama. But once you get down into the Piedmont and farther south, you're missing all of these frames of time that in this one valley here at Fort Payne, you have that all stacked up and spread out in the open for you to look at.
Now, do you talk much about the confluence of where diversity in geology creates diversity in biology?
Yes, and that is something as a biologist I've been interested in for a very long time, is that why does Alabama have this extremely high biodiversity? Well, in the plant world, we have it because all of these rare plants in forest communities are tied to particular kinds of soils that develop on particular kinds of rocks. And if we have this just incredible mosaic of surface rocks here in the state, including those that go way back into the Cambrian period, there we have a lot of, almost a mosaic of different kinds of soils that have developed. And some of these are very harsh environments for plants to develop in, such as the sandstone glades that you have here along the edge of the canyons. There's things that can adapt to those kinds of environments, and they're very selective. And so that is one thing that increases the biodiversity. But then we have the highest biodiversity is in aquatic systems, where we have all of these different kinds of streams. They have different chemical properties. They have different substrates, different kinds of rocks they flow over. And we have a history where we have not been affected by the ice ages as much here. These things have been here for a very long time. This has been almost a refuge for many kinds of plants and animals because we were just far enough south to never be beneath the glaciers and have our land changed appreciably.
That's a great explanation. Now, we get this question at the Canyon Center a lot. Is this really a river on top of a mountain? How unusual is that, and how did that happen?
Well, Little River flows along the top of the mountain because of the structure of the mountain, which is a very gentle syncline. Now, syncline is a downward fold in the earth. You could think of it here as being a trough, and the river starts at one end of the trough, and it's much easier for it to flow along the trough than to get out of the trough on either side. And that is what makes the canyon what it is, because the river has been constrained to stay in that course. So over time, all the sand and gravel that is washed along as these rocks deteriorate and erode away, that helps grind the canyon down. And these points in the canyon, such as the waterfalls, are points where the highest energy of that erosion occurs. And they change over time. The waterfalls move upstream by headward migration. So Little River Falls at one point in time was way down at Canyon View. And DeSoto Falls at one time was here. And it has migrated up over great periods of time. So it's these forces working together that has shaped the canyon as it is. Now, how unusual? Well, you can go over to Sand Mountain over the next valley over, and Sand Mountain is a gentle syncline where all the streams run straight along it before jumping off. And it's very easy to see that on Google Earth, to watch the direction of the streams, and you'll see it's very similar to what you have here.
You know, Allan, it would make a great animated video that just to show over time how that's happened. Have you ever seen a great animated video of the geologic process you just described for Alabama?
I never have. That would be good to have. A lot of teachers would use it if you had that to be able to explain that.
That would be a really great tool.
Because the way we're talking about it here, it's very abstract, and it's hard for people to grasp what you're see happening over great periods of time.
And talking about slow. Really
very slow. I used one illustration of slow today with the group that I had out in the field, and I mentioned that I've seen photographs taken of DeSoto Falls that were made back about 1870, right after the Civil War, when photography was really coming into its own. And photographers had made pictures of DeSoto Falls, and you can compare those pictures from 1870 with photographs taken today, and you cannot visually tell any difference in the position of that falls in 150 years approximately. So what we see in the processes that have formed the canyon are inexorably slow, where human time frame is just a blink of an eye compared
100 years doesn't count.
Right.
I'm gonna do two more quick questions. I hate not to talk about fossils, at least for a second, and especially when this place is just rich with fossils. When you think of Little River Canyon, what flavor of fossils come to mind?
Well, there's some things about Little River Canyon fossils. First of all, sandstone is not a great rock for preserving fossils, but the fossils we do get here are mostly coal-age plants. And many of them are in deposits where they're laying at odd angles. They're almost like log jams in these coal-age rivers that were preserved. And the kinds of plants that are in the rock are plants that are no longer on the earth. These coal-age trees, spore-forming trees, long predate flowering plants. But these fossils do tell something that geologists fight over all the time. Were these freshwater sandstones or were these marine sandstones? Now, the classic explanation is that they're marine, and yet there's never a marine fossil in them. Every fossil that you can see down in that canyon wall is going to be a fossil plant that fell into fresh water. So my description of this in the book is that these are intermingling channels of braided type streams that were flowing off of the Appalachians as they were rising and being destroyed by erosion down in the tropical climate that we were in during the Coal Age.
It's not only accurate, it sounds very poetic the way you describe it. And then last would be, and this is somewhat self-serving, but how do places like the Little River Canyon Center and what we're doing here, how do they help you to teach the things you love to teach?
Well, having a place on site like this where teachers could bring their classes and sit them down before you go out and say, this is what we're going to do today, this is what we're going to study. The real teaching happens when you set the stage where you know what you're going to be doing and the kids are tuned to what you're going to be doing. So having a physical place such as this center where you can prepare the kids for what you're going to see out in the day, that's how you make the best use of the time. It's a big expenditure of time and energy and planning to get a class of kids out anywhere in the wilds. But having a place where you can make the best use of it, that's where an environmental center really comes in.
I don't mean to draw a parallel between dinosaurs and field trips, but it does seem as though field trips are becoming fewer and further between. You want to state the case for field trips?
Well, when I started out teaching 40-something years ago, it was very easy to get field trips because there was less of a pressure to prepare kids for tests than there are today. There was less of a liability issue than what you have today. You had much better support from parents. They knew if you were taking the kids out, you had a reason to do it, and they supported you. And lastly, it's harder, the general liability issue when you have kids out of a protected environment, whether they get stung by yellow jackets or what, things you can't plan ahead of time. It's a more precarious position for teachers nowadays. You can't get them out without signing waivers and things. And when I started teaching 40-something years ago, it was not as critical about that. You had the support of the community. You knew that what you did, as long as you could demonstrate it was the kid's best interest, you were pretty well protected. I don't know that it's that clear now, but I know that there are some principals that they just don't want to go through the extra attention that it takes to get a field trip on schedule.